All right, let's get going. So this is very important and also sensitive topic that we may need more than hour and a half, but still it would be really good to have and kick off this discussion at the center. So I especially thanks to Gillen and Phillip Benachour, who's going to be our guest today. But the session, I hope, is going to be all us talking together and discussing this issue rather than presentation heavy. So for the recording, my name is Kyungmee Lee. I'm one of the co-director of the center, and welcome everyone to join this show and tell session, a part of international celebrating International Collaboration Week or month at the Department of Education Research at Lancaster University. So today we're going to talk about establishing trusting relationship with international partners. Partners meaning that the international researchers and participants, also the people involved in international research project. So if you can unmute, you can turn off your camera and microphone unless you talk, that will be great. And feel free to use chat room. We're going to have a little bit of exercise of breakout room here and there, so you can probably have opportunity to talk. Use that to, if you want to tweet this session, you're more than welcome. Yeah, you can use those to text. The session will be recorded as usual and uploaded on CTEL YouTube channel. So the session will be starting with the small group chat, which is quite unusual. So if you're not ready for it, have probably 30 seconds to get ready for this small chat first. So before hearing Julia Gillen sharing her story and thoughts on this issue, I want you to all go into small group of 4 to begin with, and then say hi to each other and kind of share some of the thoughts before kicking off the actual discussion. And then after that, we're going to hear Julia Gillen's thoughts. And then also Philip is going to sharing his research experience in Africa. And then we're going to put you back in your original group. So hope many of you can stay until end of sessions to, discuss further after hearing those 2 talks. And we'll come back to large group and see what we can do. And if from the center perspective, what kind of support we can provide to other members. So that can be how we going to utilize this 1.5 hour of session very productively. And then for now, let's just move on to, so before small group chat, you have to know what you are supposed to do in the little group. So meet each other to say hello to each other. If you feel like you're not ready, you feel comfortable to turn on your camera, that's fine. You can just use your beautiful voice to say hi. And just share some of your experience of involving in any international research project so far, and then working with other researchers and participants from different cultural contexts. That will be good to share a little bit. What were the biggest challenge? If some of you haven't had experience, I myself haven't involved in any large project as well. So don't worry, if you haven't experienced that, I'll just share what you're afraid of the most if you think about large or small scale international research project. So is that, yes, so that's what we can do. Hello, welcome back everyone. I think people are still coming in. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, but it's not projected.
So
just
presentation. Okay, that's good. So I hope that you enjoyed that little chat. It's kind of unusual that without giving you anything, just put you in the small group. I hope that that little conversation and sharing your experience was a nice way to open this, discussion. So now we're going to listen to a little talk from Julia Gillen. Julia Gillen is our one of our core member of the center. She's been one of the contributor to the center for a long time, and so we're very grateful for her to agree to give us a little talk. So Julia is Professor of Literacy Studies at the Department of Linguistics and English Language at Lancaster University, and also one of the active members that we have. So Julia has prepared a short video, which I can play in a minute. However, Julia, if you're there, do you want to say hi before your video is played?
Yes, of course. Thank you for me. Yes, I'm yeah, so as you said, I'm a long-standing member of the centre because this means a lot with my research interests. And when you invited me to talk today, I thought, what better idea is there than bringing in a few friends to this fascinating topic to get more than one perspective. So that's why I made the video. So I'll be very grateful if you play it. Thank you.
All right, can you see on the screen right now?
Yes.
All right, so, okay, I'm gonna move to another Julia on the screen. All right, good.
Welcome to Building Trust in International Partnerships. I'm Julia Gillen, Professor of Literacy Studies in the Department of Linguistics and English Language. I'm indebted to help from my colleagues in my own department and our partner university, the University of Lausanne, in putting together this video. The people who have helped me put this resource together are Oksana Rafitska, Verity Elston and Diane Potts. So after this introduction, I'll be sharing some advice from Oksana Rafitska, who is the Director of Internationalisation, Department of Linguistics and English Language. I'll then be sharing a conversation with Verity Elston, Head of Careers Advice for doctoral and postdoctoral researchers at the University of Lausanne. I'll be sharing advice from Diane Potts, a lecturer in the Department of Linguistics and English Language, and finally reflecting on my experience from the peer-to-peer deaf multiliteracies research into a sustainable approach to the education of deaf children and young adults in the Global South, 2017 to 2020. So to start with Oksana. Oksana said when I asked her, in my view, trusting relationships with international partners start from a mutual desire of two or more partner universities to provoke, sustain and grow collaborative activity for the benefit of all parties. So establishing trust really means willing and working together towards fulfilment of a common goal. In my experience, the strongest and most productive partnerships start from individual connections and expand to include wider networks of colleagues who share similar vision and who are willing to invest their time and resources to facilitate and support the development of those collaborations. It is through this type of engagement that trust between partner institutions is built. It happens via recurring activity of planning together, working together, supporting and advising each other, and accomplishing set goals together. So Verity, I'm very glad to meet you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to tell me a little bit about your role and about your experience of building trust, researching internationally.
Sure. So I lead the Career Advice and Counselling Service for the University of Lausanne, specifically with our doctoral candidates and our postdoc researchers. That's through the graduate campus, and we're really a sort of a hub of information for all of our early career researchers. And what I do there, I mean, it's a tripartite role, let's say. The first, most obviously, is working with individuals, so giving individual advice, counselling, and helping them think through their career development. The second is organising workshops and activities to help them with other researchers as well to develop their own competences. And then the third part is really internal and external projects, working with our partners to develop different initiatives.
Right. What tips would you give for people concerned with working internationally, perhaps with new partners internationally, and how they can build trust in new relationships?
So I think there's a twofold answer to that. One is my own experience. I grew up in Ireland. I did my first degree there. I moved to Chicago for my master's and my PhD. I did my fieldwork in Italy. And then I came to Switzerland just as I was finishing up my thesis. And one of the things that was very true, I think, for me in that whole experience was the importance of asking questions, of not assuming that just because it was a new place, and it was quite difficult sometimes, even, you know, in the US, you sort of think, oh, but everybody's a native English speaker, it's the same thing. Not at all. I remember having the most awful imposter syndrome when I arrived in Chicago, just hearing all of these people talking so fast and expressing themselves so easily. And it was only when I started talking about that with friends, American friends, and they sort of said to me, yeah, but that's how we were educated. We were educated to express ourselves, educated to give our opinion, whereas, you know, especially where in the sort of the media that I grew up in, we weren't expected to give our you know, our advice, or our thoughts weren't expected. So I think, you know, that's one of the big things, is just to ask those questions, to listen, to observe, to understand that just because things are so strange doesn't mean that there isn't an answer, and that you can work out a way to resolve the issue. And I think so the other part of how I would think about this question of doing research internationally is the people who come to me, the people who talk to me. So at Lausanne, you know, we have a very international population. Switzerland in general, in research, we have a lot of people who come to do their doctorate or their postdoc in Switzerland. And what I see a lot of is, you know, people who find themselves in a new country, and it can be quite difficult to integrate. Very often people don't speak the local language, and of course in Switzerland we've got 3, 4, 5 languages. So you're already speaking in your second language when you arrive, and suddenly you've got a third language around you. So that can be very tough. So again, I think for me, the answer is asking questions, and not just getting the first response, taking the first response that you get, to keep asking questions, keep asking the same question, because the response will be different, the answer will be different, and that will give you the perspectives that you need to get a better sense of the whole.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Diane Potts is one of my colleagues who's extremely experienced in international partnerships, so I asked her to share her view.
I'm not sure that establishing trust in international partnerships is any different from establishing trust in any new partnership. The lines that divide nations are not necessarily the most difficult lines to negotiate. But there is the issue of establishing trust when something is new. So I suppose there's 3 things that I think are important in that vein. One is that everyone has a clear understanding of each other's needs. And that's more than just what are we trying to accomplish. It's about what do we need to make it work? What kinds of resources are we going to need from on our own end, on the other end? What kind of time frames? What ways are we going to need the other person to communicate with us? Where are we going to exchange information? So I think the needs have to be made explicit. And part of the reason for making the needs explicit is then, as we continue to work, we can foreground each other's needs. So rather than me saying what I need, I can say, well, one of the things you've said you need is, and here's what I'm trying to do, and essentially, is this working for you? So I think being explicit about needs is important in building trust in any new relationship or partnership. Similarly, the same conversation needs to take place around norms. If I email you, how quickly will you respond? Does that matter? What are our norms for how we talk to each other? How are we going to talk when there's a problem? You know, can we be direct? How does one go about being direct? How do we make sure things don't fester? So negotiating those norms up front before we ever get started on whatever the project is going to be, and making sure that we know how to work through things before we ever have to work through something. To me, that's an essential part of building trust. And the fact that we can talk about those things up front is in itself a trust-making step. And along with that is forgiveness. because we're all going to make mistakes and we're not going to follow through. And something that we might think is minor seems big to the other person. Something that seems minor to them may feel big to us. And so I think anytime one is building trust in a relationship, one goes into it in the spirit of forgiveness. And despite how cranky one might feel, including cranky in the context of a lockdown, one puts that in check and begins conversations in the spirit of trust and of trusting.
Finally, I'd like to share some ideas from my own participation in the Peer-to-Peer Deaf Multiliteracies project. This is a project centering on deaf people in India, Uganda and Ghana, led by Ulrika Zeschen at UCLan. The essential idea is to leverage funds and resources from the Global North, as more specifically UCRI, to support educational interventions in the 3 countries. Virtually all participants are deaf. There are 2 tiers of students, deaf young adults, deaf very young children. Our peer tutors are deaf, and we have deaf research assistants. We also work in deaf settings, for example, the Indoor School for the Deaf, a long-established boarding school for deaf children from very young towards college age, the Happy Hands School for the Deaf, a new charity in a sustainable eco-village with our deaf co-participant Sibaji Panda, and we work with partners such as the Delhi Association for Deaf Women. So we work in the project then with people who use sign languages, 3 different sign languages, and are working towards English literacy. I'd say what I learned about establishing trust in international partnerships, one thing was the value of the multiliteracies approach, appreciating that everybody has a developing semiotic repertoire. So this is counter to a deficit perspective on, for example, deafness or childhood. It enables a focus on welcoming multimodal communication and different platforms. So, for example, we had to change our communications technologies when it became that WhatsApp is a very important communications tool for the deaf. We had to learn great patience with different flows and procedures in the different countries. For example, some countries have multiple or very long holidays. We had to show some sensitivity as to when it's best to keep quiet and just listen. For example, I had just 1 meeting in Ghana with stakeholders, but I was the only white person there. I had prepared the things to say, but decided in the course of the meeting, in view of what was said, that it would be wiser actually not to seek to take the public floor, but to have one-to-one conversations with people during the break afterwards. And I do think that was the best thing to decide to do in the moment, even though it was so difficult having gone so far. So finally then, having listened to these contributions, I wonder, what do you think is most important in building trust in international partnerships, both in your own specific context, if this applies, and more generally?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Julia. Can I invite you back to the group? Where are you on Zoom? Great. This is such a great video, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, this is my 3rd time watching it, but I still enjoyed it. Before we go moving into Phil, is there any kind of questions or comments about this short video from the group? I know that I didn't give you time to chat about it because I want everyone to focus on listening and watching video because it's such an intense 12 minutes. So I can just open up right now. If anyone wants to speak, feel free to raise your hand or turn on your mic and talk. Oh, Oma.
If I may, in addition to everything that has been said, I would say in attempting to make international collaborations, the mention often comes up about the global North and the global South. And I would just say that if we are from the global North, one of the things we can do is to to do an audit of our own biases, because there are some assumptions about the global South that are actually misconceptions. And those misconceptions often cause barriers to collaboration. So I think if we are going to do any kind of international collaboration, we need to first do an audit of any misconceptions or assumptions we've made, especially if they are condescending assumptions. I won't go into detail, but that's my tip.
All right, thank you so much. Julia, do you want to respond? That's really
Yes,
good comment.
I utterly agree. I mean, it's I just couldn't agree with you more, essentially. It's not always easy because you don't always know. You might have the best will in the world, but you don't always know what biases and preconceptions you have until you're suddenly kind of put in a situation. So you've got to treat the whole thing as the most amazing learning opportunity. For me, it's yeah, global south, global north, deaf communities and hearing people, and how refreshing it is, for example, for me to be in a room with all deaf people where there has to be an interpreter to voice things just for me because I'm the only one that can't communicate in that setting, you know. And that's the sort of situation that really you see, you know, it's just an excellent experience.
All right, thank you for that. Yeah, Paula, thanks for your suggestion. But we're going to move into Phil's talk now. So let me just still share my screen. That will be easier, I find. So we're going to come back to this discussion. So for now, Julia, shall we move to the Phil and see? Actually, Phil's presentation will be nicely linked to the Alma's comment in the same way. So Phil, I will share your slide.
Or I could share my PowerPoint slides, whatever works best.
Oh, that will be actually really nice.
First of all, apologies for joining the meeting late. I was teaching, but also just to say how an interesting talk. I joined the latter part of the talk and just wanted to briefly comment, especially with Julia mentioning the deaf community. Almost 20 years ago, I worked with the Centre for Deaf Studies at Bristol University at the time, just for a year. And we were looking at video compression for video phones. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, being sensitive to having an audio conversation, oral conversation between two members of staff whilst a deaf person is present was something that I picked up very, very quickly at the time. Something that hearing people just take for granted, really, where you can just have a cross, you know, from one desk to the next, have a quick conversation. And it was quite obvious at the beginning that if there was a deaf person present, that we needed to adopt the sign language approach because they would feel outside of that conversation. So right. Yeah.
So while Phil, you're figuring out how to share the screen, I'll introduce you to the group. So Phil is one of our latest member, actually, who just joined last year during the pandemic to the center as associate members. And then it's a great pleasure to have him back here sharing his research. He has shared his research in one of our business meetings, and we really liked his talk a lot, and that's why we actually the session is created based on your last presentation, Phil. So it's I'm very happy to have him back here. So Phil is a senior teaching fellow at School of Computing and Communication at Lancaster University. So up now to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Kyungmee. Thank you for the invitation. This is actually a project that's been running. It's a GCRF seed-funded project that's been running for about a year and a half now, in order to build on using this work to collect some data that enables us to build on it and develop an IT applications. I know IT is a general word. And some insights that we've collected and hopefully some questions for discussion. And I'll try to keep this within the time allowed. So just as a structure, I'm going to describe what the project is about and the main objectives, which actually we've had to refine even through the interviews we've had with participants. so far, who is involved, the partner, and who are the participants. Again, we spent a bit of time thinking about the type of participants that we would like to speak to and how we refine that within the aims. What we've done so far, what we have learnt so far, and our questions. And so, let me navigate this. Yeah. So the title, well, part of the project focuses on gender economic development in West Africa, and particularly with Ghana. And we're working with a colleague, Elizabeth Patterson, who's an American Ghanaian and who leads an NGO, a Girls Education Ghana initiative. These are disadvantaged girls who have had to give up school to support families or some with disabilities as well at a young age, teenagers. And Elizabeth's organization, Social Enterprise, enables or facilitates a pathway for those students to progress. And there's a leadership element, so creating a mentorship as well for those who've succeeded to mentor the younger ones. I also work with a colleague who's there in organisation work and technology at Lancaster University Management School, and myself in the School of Computing and Communications. So broadly speaking, the aims of the projects is to investigate the social, cultural and technological barriers faced by women business owners, the small enterprises, specifically for materially disadvantaged communities, and how ICT-based learning, I realize that's quite a broad term, and I've put application or applications can support these enterprises in circumventing the challenges that they face. And we're really very much at the very early stages. I still think we are at the very early stages of the project. And so we've had to refine these objectives, but these are the later ones that I feel are the tangible ones that we can deliver. So we want to understand how our participants learn about doing business. Through conversations we've had so far, we've already quickly realized, just even with a small number of participants, we've had about 8 so far, that creating a sustainable platform requires an understanding about how they learn about doing business and get insights and identify gaps in their learning. In other words, we are speaking specifically to a particular segment, if I can use that term, of disadvantaged women entrepreneurs of different age groups, and those who have means of running business and they have entrepreneurship skills, particularly in the food industry and in the retail industry. And what I mean by that is small businesses either running from home or working in shops or even being mobile, moving from market to market. So clearly that particular segment does not have technological means. And not surprisingly for me, when we first got in touch with colleagues in Ghana, we had a list of successful women entrepreneurs who were educated and had contacts and were very versed with IT. And we weren't interested in that particular, those particular sets of participants. So the challenge is actually understanding about how they conduct their businesses, and how we can identify these gaps in learning, and crucially, which suitable technology will enable the facilitation of that learning, and what type of learning do we want them to do and grow. Yeah. So for this project to be successful in the future, we wanted it to align with the organizations such as the UNESCO for Sustainable Development. So very briefly here, really just to what UNESCO is working on in Sustainable Development Agenda for ICT in Sub-Saharan Africa is facilitate access to education, bridging learning divides, which is where we are focusing on, and strengthening inclusion. And the partner, as I said, Elizabeth Patterson and Girls Education Initiative Ghana. I met Elizabeth about 4 years ago now through my working relationship with Lancaster University Ghana. I haven't actually visited the organization itself, but I know a lot of work that they do specifically to transform the lives of young women in Ghana, improve development and poverty reduction of the country overall. So our participants, and I hope you can see this, so we've spent quite a bit of time to kind of refine this and identify the segment that we wanted. And as I said at the beginning, we were given a list from contacts that we had for successful entrepreneurs. We wanted to really start from the beginning. So we wanted to learn from this particular segment about how they do business. We were asked to focus on COVID and business continuity, and some of those questions that we posed at the beginning to our partners focused on COVID. But we discovered through time and through the conversations that we've had, we moved from a semi-structured interview to completely unstructured, actually. And this is very much where I feel is part of the being sensitive to the participants themselves. So we've looked at, as I said, entrepreneurs who have a business, but don't necessarily use IT, or maybe use IT, but not necessarily know how they could use it to expand on their businesses. And who require support in terms of knowledge, advice, or connecting with a community of practice to enable them to sustain that business. And some who have experience of doing business, but need to share and connect and grow with others. So hence that community of practice. So what we have done so far is we've gathered some data through the online semi-structured interviews, which, as I said, now are actually unstructured. So first of all, I found this a challenge because the original plan was for myself and Uzair to travel to Ghana and spend 2 weeks meeting participants. This is what we really wanted to do. The fund was really to pay for travel, so we could speak to those participants. And of course, due to COVID, we've had that challenge on having to pivot online, but we've managed that successfully. And so far we've interviewed 8 participants, a mix of experience and new women entrepreneurs, mainly on food and fashion, but we were open to speak to others. And we explored their current challenges, the gender, the disadvantages based on their gender, disadvantages in terms of access to support and advice, either through NGOs, either because some participants are not aware that these exist, or perhaps they don't have the means to find out, or they're not in connection with specific NGOs or organizations that can support this particular segment. However, we did find out from at least 2 participants who had experience over 15, 20 years, who supported their own families, that they did have access to, to support and help, and to sort of learn about, doing business, connecting with others, and so on. So on to the developing a sensitive, inclusive, and collaborative relationship. And so this touches upon gender for us. So first of all, Elizabeth couldn't take part in all the interviews, and there's myself and Uzair, who are both males, live in the West. We were very much aware of that. This is about gender economic development, and there's myself and Uzair, who are both male, wanting to interview females. So We really wanted to ensure that we had at least one female person from the country who could help us, and Elizabeth could be there sometimes, but she couldn't be present, so we tried to engage others in the same organization. We're aware of the difference in social economical background that we have with the participants, differences in language, sometimes there's requirement for translation, and difference in cultural aspects. And so this is very much where we started to look at doing exploratory research, really trying to learn about how they are doing things. And I'm very much aware of some of the challenges working with a colleague such as John Traxler in the past, who developed mobile learning pedagogy and application in Africa. The very first thing he said was developing a mobile application for a different cultural environment and learning context is not about taking a Western perspective and planting it elsewhere, but it's more about modifying that to fit within that particular culture. And that's something I was aware of from some time ago. So this exploratory research really aims to try and understand these learning gaps, to try and get these insights to develop hopefully a learning application in the future. So as I said, we moved from semi-structured to unstructured because we felt that this really gives the floor to participants to give us their views on their learning experiences and challenges so far. And hence it did move into different directions, but I feel it's very useful. And the idea now is to analyze some of the interviews and focus on co-development of the objectives, but also of the applications. And finally, on building and fostering those connections. And I'm sure you agree that this takes quite a lot of time to build trust, as was mentioned earlier. So what we've learned so far, so we have identified gaps between participants' business backgrounds. We have identified that some have been doing this for quite some time. They've supported their own families, brought up their children. They have quite a lot of knowledge, but some are able to share it. We found out recently through one participant. Others really haven't shared it with anybody, not because they did not want to, but mainly because they didn't have the means to, or didn't think that this was a requirement. So the idea behind a community of practice wasn't something that they felt was something that's available, essentially. There was some who had different motivations and personal expectations. Some were motivated because they were keen to support their families. The expectations change from one participant to others. There's some who have done this for long enough and worked long hours and are really winding down, but we really would like them to continue in order to share their experiences. But generally, a lot are happy to share. The younger ones have some really high expectations. They want to connect with those well-established leading entrepreneurs in Ghana. They want to set up offices one day, become internationally known sort of fashion designers, expand in the markets and so on, but don't have the means to, don't have the technology and the understanding of how that could be implemented. As I said, we're still at the early stages, so 8 participants it requires a bit more. So we're targeting about 20 to 25, and yeah, this leads me on to our questions. I would like to ask: have you been involved in a similar project and similar participants? We've really thought long and hard about the kind of digital technology that's called artifacts that we would like, which would be suitable, usable, sustainable to facilitate the learning. So yeah, this is something that number two, something that we're really still thinking about and we're still grappling with this, specifically in terms of the usability and sustainability, and making it suitable for the participants. Many who don't have smartphones, some do, but others don't. And yeah, I'm open to have a discussion about this and tell you a little bit more. And finally, what kind of activities should be considered as part of the participative design process if you have experience in this area. So I hope I've not gone over time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. That was perfect. The 15 minutes. All right, Phil, do you want to unshare your screen?
Yeah.
We can have other people popped on the screen.
Yeah.
Their faces.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. So from the group, if there is any kind of quick question or comment, that would be good to share before moving into. You just turn off your camera, Phil. That's good. All right, if you have anything to share, you can raise your hand so I can see, or you can unmute yourself and. All right. One thing that I realized, I remember from our previous conversation, Phil, that you haven't really mentioned today is the kind of related to the assumption part. You kind of assume certain social or cultural, economic status of those participants in your way. And like some of them may need more help and so on. That's what you imagine. But actually, when you met them, some of them are quite in comfortable kind of position financially and so on. I mean, you kind of mentioned that. So you really try to identify those who are in this vantage situation that we need to help. So do you want to unpack that a little bit? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, we got in touch with colleagues at Lancaster, first of all, here, those who are working in the Recirculate project, and some who from Lancaster University, Ghana. Yeah, the list what we had were really essentially successful entrepreneurs who have the educational background and have the knowledge and have the infrastructure to support themselves. They understand what digital marketing is. They understand how to use social network. That is not to say that these participants cannot use social networking. And again, I want to emphasize it isn't about us saying, "Oh, well, how about you use digital marketing," because it might be a concept that they're not familiar with. So yeah, we really did not see any value in doing a project with people who are digitally savvy, but we realized that this could be a challenge. One of the things that we've started to think about recently is focusing on digital storytelling, because technologically this enables our participants to be able to record using just a standard phone. You can record audio, you can take pictures with a non-smartphone and post that or send it through a text mechanism, a channel that will enable that to be shared with others. We certainly found out that some of those gaps can be filled with the experienced participants. So it's really quite sort of, it isn't sophisticated technology. It does not require sort of people to watch YouTube or to use a social network site. It just requires a simple mechanism to enable that data transfer. And digital storytelling as say a digital diary, I feel would facilitate that, and it's easy to implement because you've got the ability to record an audio, for instance. You certainly can circumvent the challenges with language. So, for example, Twi is one of the local languages, and people would understand it. But it's a bilingual country, as I understand it. But certainly, recording audio is quite effective. So this is where we're at.
Mm-hmm. I think we have some question in the chat. All right, so all right, so let's take one question from probably JB. Do you want to ask that question? And then we're going to move into small group discussion.
Hi again. Yeah, you mentioned on the previous slide how the level of motivation of the different participants can vary. So I just wanted to know how you think you can work on maintaining, increasing their level of motivations. We know how it's important for an entrepreneur to have a high level of motivation. There's always a lot of ups and downs. So just wanted to see if you can unpack that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what we found is the experienced participants. So out of the 8 we've interviewed so far, 2 have experience. In other words, they've been in business for about 20, 25 years. So they're in a different age group to the others. One of them in particular cooks for workers between, say, 4 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, till 10 o'clock in the morning. So that's the kind of a busy period. And then she has a little rest and then carries on making food for later in the day, say from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock in the evening. So quite long hours. And I think that lack of motivation, well, the reduction in motivation was coming through the fact that it's through her age, really. She's saying, I've brought my kids up now, I'm 50 plus, I'm getting tired. But this is somebody who has a lot of experience, and we feel she'd be able to pass on a lot of her experiences to others.
All right, thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
That was a good question. We have another question, however, I think maybe that question, Maria, you can probably discuss it in your small group. So what we're gonna do, Brett, if you're able to put them back in their original group, that will be good. So we're going to go into our small group. We had a chance to say hi before, and then some of the questions raised by these 2 speakers. So what can be the most important thing for us to remember to develop this or establish the trusting relationships? Also, since we're tell people, perhaps what is the roles of digital technology as raised by Phil just now? So is there anything we can do to address some of the challenges and make the experience more enhanced by technology? That would be nice to have a little chat in the group. Welcome back.
Hey.
Great. Yeah, we have a lovely, nice small group now, divided into 3 groups, which is perfect for us to recap the session. I know it's like huge topic, and then of course hour and a half is not enough, but I hope that you had a very, very productive conversation. I mean, I enjoyed my small group talk, and we kind of tackled important things as a small group as well. So what I want to do is that since we talked something, I want each group to briefly share the one thing that was most interesting or important that everyone should know and take away from the session. So I may invite group 1 first. I don't know who were there. So is anyone who wants to kind of share what you have talked? Cool. JB, your group then.
Okay. So the most important thing, I'm not sure because we've talked about so many things. If anyone from my group want to interview and tell me I'm just saying silly things, just stop me then. I think we all discussed that the difficulty is that online interaction are not the same as face-to-face, and for entrepreneurs it might be very difficult. They're all from different backgrounds. We don't remember where they are based. Actually, it was interesting to discuss that, if face-to-face is possible in some ways. But basically, we thought that entrepreneurs all have some challenges in their jobs, some ups and downs. And so what I experienced in residentials before is that when you have the residential online, the interaction doesn't happen as it happens in face-to-face, except if you face a difficulty. And when you face a real difficulty, you have to come up with a solution together. So maybe working as a group together is helping. When you're online, it can actually help.
Thank you. Oh, it's interesting that we talked the same thing. Phil, have you unmuted yourself to add something?
I'm just making a note, actually, because that was quite insightful. Yeah, what we discussed, actually, I had a session in our group. There was Yu Hong and Maria and also Omar. And Maria asked me a question that I still cannot answer at the moment because we haven't found a solution. So what I emphasized, that we were keen to find a suitable technology that would enable us to develop an application. And we settled on something that could be simple to use, for example, digital storytelling for sharing practice between users. This is where we are at the moment. We discussed differences in language and culture. Specifically the challenges faced from even how language can be complex. Even using English language, for example, between countries has different meanings, and what we mean by that. And that was something that we were, you know, we're still working on ourselves. For example, just to answer the question, I suppose I was asked that question in my group. What we've learned is to, through a translator, actually, translating from English to Twi, it's kind of like, can you just be direct and tell me what it is that you want to know exactly, rather than just, you know, say it all in a big paragraph. So that was quite clear. And the culture of learning is understanding the differences in learning between, say, a UK perspective and an African perspective. We also talked about familiarities with ICT and the digital divide, and hence me still grappling with what we're trying to produce as a solution that's sustainable. I also said that through the interviews, my role is to really gather requirements and be able to co-produce. So when you develop a piece of software, we have in our field what you call functional requirements, what the software must do. In other words, like click on this button, it'll do that. And non-functional requirements, which is a measure of quality. So user interface, for example, if it's more usable, intuitive, then you're more likely to use it more. And the difference between those, and what I want to do is draw those requirements to feed back into the design.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we can certainly have you back at a certain point once you have the outcomes. You can share it back to us, and that would be good. So our group, Joe, I mean, you're, I can see your face. Do you want to briefly recap what we talked? Just one thing briefly before you have probably 20 seconds.
Just one thing. Just one thing. Oof, sorry, I can only think of the last thing we talked about, really, which was getting the judgment right between assimilating cultures and staying with your own, and not missing the opportunity that comes from conflict, I suppose. You know, you're being polite and building trust by respecting each other and moving towards each other. But of course, a lot of the value is in our differences, and yeah, and you can also sometimes give rude people from another culture too much patience because you give them the grace because you think, oh, it's cultural difference, when actually sometimes no, it can just be difficult.
Yeah, I think for us, the asking question and forgiveness were the two keywords that I'm going to take away from the session today. Definitely, that was very helpful. Just briefly, thank you so much to everyone stayed until the end of session and had made the session interactive, and especially to our two speakers for the brilliant contributions, and of course that I do believe we're going to build upon this conversation and have more conversation at center level. So next week we have 2 events left. It's like, what a big month. Yeah, I was like getting tired toward the end. But next Monday, is it next Monday or Tuesday? So 27 April, that Brett, is it Monday or Tuesday? I think it's Monday, right?
Tuesday.
Sorry. Next Tuesday we have Meet and Eat with a lot of authors who contributed to second issue of the CTEL. So it's all about the TEL project in Middle Eastern context, which is really nicely led upon on from our conversation today. And then next Friday, anyone who wants to just join, this is going to be informal chat that we want to recap the entire month and all the conversation we have done and how CTEL, the center, can develop more and utilize our international partners in more smart way to create better research projects. So we want to just share the ideas and then set up the plans. So you're more than welcome to come and join us to those 2 events, and then that will be nice finale. All right, so that's all for today. So thank you so much for everyone. If you can just unmute yourself and say bye and thank you to each other, that will be lovely.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.